Do 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 do. Yeah. We're still reading Leviticus. Welcome to It's Lit with Mitch. I'm Mitch. I read powerful literature out loud, beginning to end, all the way through, even through Leviticus. So, we're going to jump right in. We are starting at chapter 14 of Leviticus, and we've got about 15 pages left, so I'll probably do today, tomorrow, and then probably try and discuss it with somebody on Saturday or Sunday. I better line someone up for that. So, anyway, we're going to hop right in to chapter 14 of Leviticus, cleansing from skin diseases. And the Lord said to Moses, "The following instructions are for those seeking ceremonial purification from a skin disease. Those who have been healed must be brought to the priest, who will examine them at a place outside the camp. If the priest finds that someone has been healed of a serious skin disease, he will perform a purification ceremony using 2 live birds that are ceremonially clean, a stick of cedar, some scarlet yarn, and a hyssop branch. The priest will order that 1 bird be slaughtered over a clay pot filled with fresh water. He will take the live bird, the cedar stick, the scarlet yarn, and the hyssop branch, and dip them into the blood of the bird that was slaughtered over the fresh water. The priest will then sprinkle the blood of the dead bird 7 times on the person being purified of the skin disease. When the priest has purified the person, he will release the live bird in the open field to fly away." Poor bird. And also, what if ironically the blood from the slaughtered bird, what if it had a disease in it that upon sprinkling it 7 times on the now healed person actually made them sick in such a way that it ultimately spread to the rest of the community? That seems very unsanitary, to be just sprinkling slaughtered bird blood on somebody. Anyway, the persons being purified must then wash their clothes, shave off all their hair, and bathe themselves in water. Then they will be ceremonially clean and may return to the camp. However, they must remain outside their tents for 7 days. On the 7th day, they must again shave all their hair from their heads, including the hair of the beard and eyebrows. They must also wash their clothes and bathe themselves in water. Then they will be ceremonially clean. On the 8th day, each person being purified must bring 2 male lambs and a 1-year-old female lamb, all with no defects, along with a grain offering of 6 quarts of choice flour moistened with olive oil and a cup of olive oil. Then the officiating priest will present that person for purification, along with the offerings, before the Lord at the entrance of the tabernacle. The priest will take one of the male lambs and the olive oil and present them as a guilt offering, lifting them up as a special offering before the Lord. He will then slaughter the male lamb in the sacred area where sin offerings and burnt offerings are slaughtered. As with the sin offering, the guilt offering belongs to the priest. It is a most holy offering. The priest will then take some of the blood of the guilt offering and apply it to the lobe of the right ear, the thumb of the right hand, and the big toe of the right foot to the person being purified. Then, the priest will pour some of the olive oil into the palm of his own left hand. He will dip his right finger into the oil in his palm and sprinkle some of it with his finger 7 times before the Lord. The priest will then apply some of the oil in his palm over the blood from the guilt offering that is on the lobe of the right ear, the thumb of the right hand, and the big toe of the right foot of the person being purified. The priest will apply the oil remaining in his hand to the head of the person being purified. Through this process, the priest will purify the person before the Lord. Then the priest must present the sin offering to purify the person who was cured of the sin disease. After that, the priest will slaughter the burnt offering and offer it on the altar along with the grain offering. Through this process, the priest will purify the person who was healed, and the person will be ceremonially clean. But anyone who is too poor and cannot afford these offerings may bring 1 male lamb for a guilt offering, to be lifted up as a special offering for purification. The person must also bring 2 quarts of choice flour, moistened with olive oil for the grain offering, and a cup of olive oil. The offering must also include 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, whichever the person can afford. One of the pair must be used for the sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. On the 8th day of the purification ceremony, the person being purified must bring the offerings to the priest and the Lord's presence at the entrance of the tabernacle. The priest will take the lamb for the guilt offering, along with the olive oil, and lift them up as a special offering to the Lord. Then the priest will slaughter the lamb for the guilt offering. He will take some of its blood and apply it to the lobe of the right ear, the thumb of the right hand, and the big toe of the right foot of the person being purified. I gotta take this sweatshirt off. Oh my gosh. Did it get hot in here? Wow. Alright. The priest will also pour some of the olive oil into the palm of his own left hand. He will dip his right finger into the oil in his palm and sprinkle some of it 7 times before the Lord. The priest will then apply some of the oil in his palm over the blood from the guilt offering that is on the lobe of the right ear, the thumb of the right hand, and the big toe of the right foot of the person being purified. The priest will apply the oil remaining in his hand to the head of the person being purified. Through this process, the priest will purify the person before the Lord. Then the priest will offer the 2 turtle doves or the 2 young pigeons, whichever the person can afford. One of them is for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering, to be presented along with the grain offering. Through this process, the priest will purify the person before the Lord. These are the instructions for purification for those who have recovered from a serious skin disease, but who cannot afford to bring the offerings normally required for the ceremony of purification. Treatment of contaminated houses. I feel like we're about to get really relevant here. Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "When you arrive in Canaan, the land I am giving you as your own possession, I may contaminate some of the houses in your land with mildew. The owner of such a house must then go to the priest and say, 'It appears that my house has some kind of mildew.'" Easy enough instruction. Before the priest goes in to inspect the house, he must have the house emptied so nothing inside will be pronounced ceremonially unclean. Then the priest will go in and examine the mildew on the walls. If he finds greenish or reddish streaks and the contamination appears to go deeper than the wall surface, the priest will step outside the door and put the house in quarantine for 7 days. On the 7th day, if the priest must return for another inspection. On the 7th day, the priest must return for another inspection. If he finds that the mildew on the walls of the house has spread, the priest must order that the stones from those areas be removed. The contaminated material will then be taken outside the town to an area designated as ceremonially unclean. Next, the inside walls of the entire house must be scraped thoroughly, and the scrapings dumped in the unclean place outside the town. Other stones will be brought in to replace the ones that were removed, and the walls will be replastered. But if the mildew reappears after all the stones have been replaced, and the house has been scraped and replastered, the priest must return and inspect the house again. If he finds that the mildew has spread, the walls are clearly contaminated with a serious mildew, and the house is defiled, it must be torn down, and all its stones, timbers, and plaster must be carried out of town to the place designated as ceremonially unclean. Those who enter the house during the period of quarantine will be ceremonially unclean until evening, and all who eat or sleep in the house must wash their clothing. But if the priest returns for his inspection and finds that the mildew has not reappeared in the house after the fresh plastering, he will pronounce it clean because the mildew is clearly gone. To purify the house, the priest must take 2 birds, a stick of cedar, some scarlet yarn, and a hyssop branch. Here we go again. He will slaughter one of the birds over a clay pot filled with fresh water. He will take the cedar stick, the hyssop branch, the scarlet yarn, and the live bird, and dip them into the blood of the slaughtered bird and into the fresh water. Then he will sprinkle the house 7 times. When the priest has purified the house in exactly this way, he will release the live bird in the open fields outside the town. Through this process, The priest will purify the house, and it will be ceremonially clean. These are the instructions for dealing with serious skin diseases, including scabby sores and mildew, whether on clothing or in a house, and a swelling on the skin, a rash, or discolored skin. This procedure will determine whether a person or object is ceremonially clean or unclean. These are the instructions regarding skin diseases and mildew. Thank you. Thank you, Lord. Bodily discharges. Chapter 15. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Give the following instructions to the people of Israel. Any man who has a bodily discharge is ceremonially unclean. This defilement is caused by his discharge, whether the discharge continues or stops. In either case, the man is unclean. Any bed on which the man with the discharge lies, and anything on which he sits, will be ceremonially unclean. So if you touch the man's bed, you must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will remain unclean until evening. If you sit where the man with the discharge has sat, you must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will remain unclean until evening. If you touch the man with the discharge, you must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will remain unclean until evening. If the man spits on you, you must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will remain unclean until evening." We could just use some commas, and then insert, "You must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you'll remain unclean until evening." Any saddle blanket on which the man rides will be ceremonially unclean. If you touch anything that was under the man, you will be unclean until evening. You must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will remain unclean until evening. If the man touches you without first rinsing his hands, you must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will remain unclean until evening. Any clay pot the man touches must be broken, and any wood utensil he touches must be rinsed with water. When the man with the discharge is healed, he must count off 7 days for the period of purification. What are we calling a discharge? And maybe discharge isn't the exact word that, they were using. But what is a discharge? Is it nausea, vomiting? Is it diarrhea? It seems like a discharge means you're pretty freaking sick. Anyway. Well. Oh, where was I? On the 8th day. Then he must wash his clothes and bathe himself in fresh water, and he will be ceremonially clean. On the 8th day he must get 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and come before the Lord at the entrance of the tabernacle, and give his offerings to the priest. The priest will offer 1 bird for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering. Through this process, the priest will purify the man before the Lord for his discharge. Whenever a man has an emission of semen, he must bathe his entire body in water, and he will remain ceremonially unclean until the next evening. Any clothing or leather with semen on it must be washed in water, and it will remain unclean until evening. After a man and a woman have sexual intercourse, they must each bathe in water, and they will remain unclean until the next evening. Finally getting interesting here. Whenever a woman has her menstrual period, she will be ceremonially unclean for 7 days. Anyone who touches her during that time will will be unclean until evening. Anything on which the woman lies or sits during the time of her period will be unclean. If any of you touch her bed, you must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will remain unclean until evening. If you touch any object she has sat on, you must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will remain unclean until evening. This includes her bed and any other object she has sat on. You will be unclean until evening if you touch it. If a man has sexual intercourse with her and her blood touches him, her menstrual impurity will be transmitted to him. He will remain unclean for 7 days, and any bed on which he lies will be unclean. If a woman has a flow of blood for many days that is unrelated to her menstrual period, or if the blood continues beyond the normal period, she is ceremonially unclean and probably sick. As during her menstrual period, the woman will be unclean as long as the discharge continues. Any bed she lies on and any object she sits on during that time will be unclean, just as during her normal menstrual period. If any of you touch these things, you will be ceremonially unclean. You must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will remain unclean until evening. When the woman's bleeding stops, she must count off 7 days. Then she will be ceremonially clean. On the 8th day, she must bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons and present them to the priest at the entrance of the tabernacle. The priest will offer one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. Through this process, the priest will purify her before the Lord for the ceremonial impurity caused by her bleeding. Is that every menstrual period, or is that, maybe I can go back, I don't want to go back. Is that just for like the excess period, the excess blood flow? Because that's like, now you're talking about like 24 birds a year that you gotta kill. That just seems wrong for no reason, right? Well, I guess there is a reason. Anyway, this is how you will guard the people of Israel from ceremonial uncleanness. Otherwise, they would die, for their impurity would defile my tabernacle that stands among them. These are the instructions for dealing with anyone who has a bodily discharge, a man who is unclean because of an emission of semen, or a woman during her menstrual period. It applies to any man or woman who has a bodily discharge, and to a man who has sexual intercourse with a woman who is ceremonially unclean. Well, that answers what a discharge is. Essentially anything. Chapter 16. The Day of Atonement. The Lord spoke to Moses after the death of Aaron's 2 sons, who died after they entered the Lord's presence, and burned the wrong kind of fire before him. The Lord said to Moses, "Warn your brother Aaron not to enter the most holy place behind the inner curtain whenever he chooses. If he does, he will die. For the ark's cover, the place of atonement, is there, and I myself am present in the cloud above the atonement cover. When Aaron enters my sanctuary area, he must follow these instructions fully. He must bring a young bull for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. He must put on his linen tunic and the linen undergarments worn next to his body. He must He must tie the linen sash around his waist and put the linen turban on his head. These are sacred garments, so he must bathe himself in water before he puts them on. Aaron must take from the community of Israel 2 male goats for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. Aaron will present his own bull as a sin offering to purify himself and his family, making them right with the Lord. Then he must take the 2 male goats and present them to the Lord at the entrance of the tabernacle. He is to cast sacred lots to determine which goat will be reserved as an offering to the Lord and which will carry the sins of the people to the wilderness of Azazel. Aaron will then present as a sin offering the goat chosen by lot for the Lord. The other goat, the scapegoat chosen by Lot to be sent away, will be kept alive, standing before the Lord. When it is sent away to Azazel in the wilderness, the people will be purified and made right with the Lord. Aaron will present his own bull as a sin offering to purify himself and his family, making them right with the Lord. After he has slaughtered the bull as a sin offering, he will fill an incense burner with burning coals from the altar that stands before the Lord. Then he will take 2 handfuls of fragrant powdered incense, and will carry the burner and the incense behind the inner curtain. There in the Lord's presence he will put the incense on the burning coals, so that a cloud of incense will rise over the ark's cover, the place of atonement that rests on the Ark of the Covenant. If he follows these instructions, he will not die. Then he must take some of the blood of the bull, dip his finger in it, and sprinkle it on the east side of the atonement cover. He must sprinkle blood 7 times with his finger in front of the atonement cover. Then Aaron must slaughter the first goat as a sin offering for the people, and carry its blood behind the inner curtain. There he will sprinkle the goat's blood over the atonement cover and in front of it, just as he did with the bull's blood. Through this process he will purify the most holy place, and he will do the same for the entire tabernacle, because of the defiling sin and rebellion of the Israelites. No one else is allowed inside the tabernacle when Aaron enters it for the purification ceremony, in the most holy place. No one may enter until he comes out again after purifying himself, his family, and all the congregation of Israel, making them right with the Lord. Then Aaron will come out to purify the altar that stands before the Lord. He will do this by taking some of the blood from the bull and the goat and putting it on each of the horns of the altar. Then he must sprinkle the blood with his finger 7 times over the altar. In this way he will cleanse it from Israel's defilement and make it holy. When Aaron has finished purifying the most holy place and the tabernacle and the altar, he must present the live goat. He will lay both of his hands on the goat's head and confess over it all the wickedness, rebellion, and sins of the people of Israel. In this way, he will transfer the people's sins to the head of the goat. Then a man specially chosen for the task will drive the goat into the wilderness. As the goat goes into the wilderness, it will carry all the people's sins upon itself into a desolate land. Yep. We're going to highlight that. Bear with me here. That's something I want to talk about, because what I'm thinking there is just about how powerful, obviously, symbolism is powerful, right? I'm not the first person to come to that conclusion. Far from it. But, that would seem to be a useful way, or some, variation on it modified to fit this time. It is useful to just symbolically take this negativity that's in you and place it into something else. Write a note and burn the note, right? But to take this negativity and place it somewhere else and then destroy it or watch it be destroyed. So that's what I'm thinking, and I want to talk about that with whoever I talk to. When Aaron goes back to the tabernacle, he must take off the linen garments he was wearing when he entered the most holy place, and he must leave the garments there. Then he must bathe himself with water in a sacred place, put on his regular garments, and go out to sacrifice a burnt offering for himself and a burnt offering for the people. Through this process, he will purify himself and the people, making them right with the Lord. He must then burn all the fat of the sin offering on the altar. The man chosen to drive the scapegoat into the wilderness of Azazel must wash his clothes and bathe himself in water. Then he may return to the camp. The bull and the goat, presented as sin offerings, whose blood Aaron takes into the most holy place for the purification ceremony, will be carried outside the camp. The animal's hides, internal organs, and dung are all to be burned. The man who burns them must wash his clothes and bathe himself in water before returning to the camp. On the 10th day of the appointed month in early autumn, you must deny yourselves. Oh, that's it. You must deny yourselves. Neither native-born Israelites nor foreigners living among you may do any kind of work. This is the appointed. What is that? Neither native-born Israelites nor foreigners living among you may do any kind of work. This is a permanent law for you. On that day, offerings of purification will be made for you, and you will be purified in the Lord's presence from all your sins. It will be a Sabbath day of complete rest for you, and you must deny yourselves. This is a permanent law for you. In future generations, the purification ceremony will be performed by the priest who has been anointed and ordained to serve as high priest in the place of his ancestor Aaron. He will put on the holy linen garments and purify the most holy place, the tabernacle, the altar, the priest, and the entire congregation. This is the permanent law for you, to purify the people of Israel from their sins, making them right with the Lord once each year. Moses followed all these instructions exactly as the Lord had commanded him. Okay, what is that? On the 10th day of the appointed month in early autumn. That's not what I know about. I probably know about that. I gotta look now. I gotta look. We are looking, what I'm doing is looking at the months here. Early autumn, 10th day. I don't know. I'm giving up. It's not easy to find. Whatever. Chapter 17 and let's keep going. Chapter 17. Prohibitions against eating blood. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Give the following instructions to Aaron and his sons and all the people of Israel. This is what the Lord has commanded. If any native Israelite sacrifices a bull or a lamb or a goat anywhere inside or outside the camp, instead of bringing it to the entrance of the tabernacle to present it as an offering to the Lord, that person will be guilty as a murderer." Alrighty. Such a person has shed blood and will be cut off from the community. The purpose of this rule is to stop the Israelites from sacrificing animals in the open fields. It will ensure that they bring their sacrifices to the priest at the entrance of the tabernacle, so he can present them to the Lord as a peace offering. Then the priest will be able to splatter the blood against the Lord's altar at the entrance of the tabernacle, and he will burn the fat as a pleasing aroma to the Lord. The people must no longer be unfaithful to the Lord by offering sacrifices to the goat idols. This is a permanent law for them to be observed from generation to generation. Give them this command as well. If any native Israelite or foreigner living among you offers a burnt offering or a sacrifice, but does not bring it to the entrance of the tabernacle to offer it to the Lord, that person will be cut off from the community. And if any native Israelite or foreigner living among you eats or drinks blood in any form, I will turn against that person and cut him off from the community of your people. For the life of the body is in its blood. I have given you the blood on the altar to purify you, making you right with the Lord. It is the blood, given in exchange for a life, that makes purification possible. That is why I have said to the people of Israel, you must never eat or drink blood, neither you nor the foreigners living among you. And if any native Israelite or foreigner living among you goes hunting and kills an animal or bird that is approved for eating, he must drain its blood and cover it with earth. The life of every creature is in its blood. That is why I have said to the people of Israel, you must never eat or drink blood, for the life of any creature is in its blood. I've been thinking this several times throughout this read, but sometimes I find like a little bit of humor, almost like it was written with intentional humor. It's sort of like it's like a scene in a movie where the narrator says, and John was just thinking about how terrible a day it was. And then the next line of dialogue is the character saying, how terrible a day it is, right? Maybe that's a bad example, but that's what I'm thinking over and over when I read these things, because it's like the Lord is saying, the life of every creature is in its blood. That is why I have said to the people of Israel, you must never eat or drink blood, for the life of any creature is in its blood. Just all the repetition. I know that there's a purpose for repetition, but sometimes I actually find it kind of funny. I'm stretching, right? I'm stretching to find the interesting stuff in Leviticus, although it's more interesting now that we're out of skin diseases and discharge. Anyway, drink. And if any native-born Israelites or foreigners eat the meat of an animal that died naturally or was torn up by wild animals, they must wash their clothes and bathe themselves in water. They will remain ceremonially unclean until evening, but then they will be clean. But if they do not wash their clothes and bathe themselves, they will be punished for their sin. Forbidden sexual practices. Then the Lord said to Moses, give the following instructions to the people of Israel. I am the Lord your God. So do not act like the people in Egypt, where you used to live, or like the people of Canaan, where I am taking you. You must not imitate their way of life. You must obey all my regulations and be careful to obey my decrees, for I am the Lord your God. If you obey my decrees and my regulations, you will find life through them. I am the Lord. You must never have sexual relations with a close relative, for I am the Lord. Do not violate your father by having sexual relations with your mother. She is your mother. You must not have sexual relations with her. Do not have sexual relations with any of your father's wives, for this would violate your father. Do not have sexual relations with your sister or half-sister, where she is your father's daughter, and your mother's daughter, whether she was born into your household or someone else's. Do not have sexual relations with your granddaughter, where she is your son's daughter, or your daughter's daughter, for this would violate yourself. Do not have sexual relations with your stepsister, the daughter of any of your father's wives, for she is your sister. Do not have sexual relations with your father's sister, for she is your father's close relative. Do not have sexual relations with your mother's sister, for she is your mother's close relative. Do not violate your uncle, your father's brother, by having sexual relations with his wife, for she is your aunt. Do not have sexual relations with your daughter-in-law, she is your son's wife, so you must not have sexual relations with her. Do not have sexual relations with your brother's wife, for this would violate your brother. Do not have sexual relations with both a woman and her daughter. And do not take her granddaughter, whether her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter, and have sexual relations with her. They are close relatives, and this would be a wicked act. While your wife is living, do not marry her sister and have sexual relations with her, for they would be rivals. Do not have sexual relations with a woman during her period of menstrual impurity. Do not defile yourself by having sexual intercourse with your neighbor's wife. This is like reading all of the options on like a porn site like Pornhub. It's just saying don't do all these things, but these are all the things one would search for. Oh God, where was I? Do not permit any of your children to be offered as a sacrifice to Molech, for you must not bring shame on the name of your God. I am the Lord. I actually never searched for that one on a porn site. So, Oh, do not practice homosexuality, having sex with another man as with a woman. It is a detestable sin. A man must not defile himself by having sex with an animal, and a woman must not offer herself to a male animal to have intercourse with it. This is a perverse act. Oh, those two are juxtaposed, incidentally. So, obviously, I will comment on homosexuality first. I don't know if they use the word homosexuality initially. I know this is the New Living Translation, and when I read in the beginning of the book, before I actually got started, they talked about how, there are translations that they've used. But I do think that there was some different wording used initially, or at least historically, prior to this NLT version. So I don't know if homosexuality is the right word there. But nonetheless, it is right here, right there. And so it does say that. So now I'm reading the actual thing. But is that it? Or does it pop up somewhere else about homosexuality? Because that's like a sentence. Did you read, we're much more worried about, skin diseases, right? And making sure the right amount of silver is used in building the altar. So, it does seem like there are some bigger priorities. Anyway. I might as well highlight it, right? I will certainly talk to the people about that. All right, do not defile yourselves in any of these ways, for the people I am driving out before you have defiled themselves in all these ways. Because the entire land has become defiled, I am punishing the people who live there. I will cause the land to vomit them out. You must obey all my decrees and regulations. These must not commit any of these detestable sins. Or you must not commit any of these detestable sins. Excuse me. This applies both to native-born Israelites and to the foreigners living among you. All these detestable activities are practiced by the people of the land where I am taking you, and this is how the land has become defiled. So do not defile the land, and give it a reason to vomit you out, as it will vomit out the people who live there now. Whoever commits any of these detestable sins will be cut off from the community of Israel. So obey my instructions, and do not defile yourselves by committing any of these detestable practices that were committed by the people who lived in the land before you. I am the Lord your God. So, in that context, if I am taking a step back, and I'm looking at this through the context of a leader leading the people to, their land, and trying to help them set up a system where they can continue to live, harmoniously and peacefully, and joyously in, service to the Lord at this point. I mean, the rules make sense. Don't stray from the path I've set before you. If you stray, then you're gonna wind up like the people that I'm literally driving out. The people that I am causing the land to vomit out of here, right? So in that context, it makes a lot of sense. And I can even see an argument standing far enough back if I'm looking at like America. I can see slippery slope arguments, right? God's basically saying, hey, these things are a slippery slope. Don't go banging your mother. Don't go banging your daughter-in-law. Don't go banging your neighbor, whatever. Like, don't go banging everybody else in the world, right? Only your dad can have multiple wives and bang them, right? Just dad. So I can definitely see a purpose for why you want this sort of homogeneous ritual lifestyle, because it will maintain order and stability for the people. And these people were just enslaved for like 400 years historically, right? And I don't know. I mean, that all makes sense. And in the context here, I can see that making sense. I mean, gosh, you don't want to know what rules I would create if I got to be an authoritarian with my new people. All right. I think we're going to call it a day there, because I got to get breakfast and get ready for work. So, we will continue Leviticus next time. Thanks.